Hey everybody, so welcome back to Jim Bob's Garden. So in my series of composting for beginners, this is going to be part 3. And we've talked about how to start your compost. We talked about how to maintain and turn your compost. And now I want to get into how to use your compost and when to use your compost. So first off, I want to show you this right here. This is my non-finished compost, and you can see the temperature's up around 142 144 degrees plus or minus a bit. Alright, so this one is still cooking, it's not ready to go. Now this one, on the other hand, now, and keep in mind, you don't need a thermometer. You can stick your hand in and you can tell by the temperature that it's either really hot or it's not. Alright, thermometer just makes it a little more clear. And the thermometer is only about 20 bucks. So I mean, if you got the money, I think it's pretty cool. I've really enjoyed mine, and I'm pleased that I actually made the purchase. So, it's up to you, but it is handy to have. Now you see this one here is down to about 104 degrees, 105 degrees plus or minus, a few. And it's 90 degrees out right now. So that's telling me that this is pretty much cooked down. Now, you can also look at the consistency of the compost. Alright, and just kind of tell by the look of it, is this broken down enough? Alright, and what you're going to see when you take a handful of it. Now these are pine needles. Pine needles take forever to break down. You can leave them in there long enough and they will eventually break down. But this has got a little bit of particulate matter yet. So it could probably break down for a little while longer if you wanted to. There's still some bark and such in there. Alright, but this is perfectly good, particularly because what I'm going to be doing with this is I'm going to be side dressing. Alright, so let's show you how we go about doing that. I will tell you, having a wagon is fantastic. Man, I really love my gorilla cart. Wouldn't leave home without it. Alright, so what we're going to do now is something called side dressing. So this is kind of an awkward spot because you usually end up dropping some stuff. As you go. So normally I try and position my cart to where when I spill, it'll spill into the garden. So I hate to waste my valuable compost. So what I do is I'll take this and I'll throw piles in here. Like so, in any bare spots. Or even up in between the plants and so on. And then what I'll do is I will take this and snuggle it up against the areas by hand where I want it to go. Now, compost is not like other fertilizers for the most part, okay, in that it's not going to burn your plants, all right, unless you have your compost, after we did the temperature reading, very, very hot. And then basically what you're doing here is something called side dressing. So you just put it right up against the plant for the most part. Now, if you have some sensitive plants, you may want to keep it away from the plant by just drawing it away like so. But for most plants, like tomatoes, don't have a problem, and I've never had an issue with basil having an issue with it. I don't really know of any that are really going to have a problem with having compost right up next to it. Because it's not a regular fertilizer, it's not a nitrogen based or a petroleum based fertilizer, there's literally little to no chance of burning your plants. I don't want to say there is no chance because I don't know that for a fact, but I've never ever had an issue doing this and it causing problems with my plants. Alright, so that's what's called side dressing, and that's how I like to use my compost once the growing season has begun. Now, come over here. Okay, so this is the spot where I just got done digging out my potatoes. And what I can do here, because I'm not going to be side dressing any plants, I just level the dirt like so. And keep in mind, you're going to be putting compost on it anyway, so it doesn't have to be perfectly level. But if you're preparing a garden bed, using compost as the preparation, or as part of the preparation, is a fantastic thing. You'll be improving the fertility of the soil with something that doesn't cost you anything, and it's actually very, very good for your soil. So then there's a couple different ways you can do this. One, I can take compost and just toss it around over the top and allow it to soak down into the soil as time goes on. Now, a lot of people will tell you that's the best way, is to just put it on top, and then they create what's called a no-dig garden, okay? Because the idea is that once I start layering compost on here, what will end up happening is, just like nature does, everything gets deposited on top, rots down and soaks down into the soil, and improves the fertility within the soil. Now, I have very sandy soil here, and so in the past what I have done is I have rototilled it, or just stirred it in with a fork into the soil, so that it actually gets down in the soil and takes my really sandy soil, which I know you probably can't see it so well in the camera, like that is very fine sand there on the very top. But some of this has been stirred up and brought in, and it has a better consistency to it, and it has more organic material worked into the soil. It kind of depends on what you want to do as to how you go about using it. I know that putting compost and mulch on top of a soil that is very clay will help to loosen the soil, because that bacteria and the different microbes get in there and really work their way through the soil and loosen that clay up. It also gives you a layer to plant into, and for the plants to grow into without having to penetrate down deep into that very clay soil. For the sandy soil, a lot of people complain that you can put compost after compost after compost and it just leaches its way through. And that's one of the reasons why I like to, at least at the beginning, start to incorporate it into the actual soil layers by stirring it up and mixing it in. And that seems to help it hold together better and seems to make it a much richer, nicer soil. I'm not going to dig it up right now, but I can tell you when I was digging up the potatoes, about the first 6 inches or so of this particular garden bed is nice, fine, sandy soil with a lot of black matter and stuff in the soil. It's actually biological material, but once you get below that 6 inches, you get into what's really just sand. Now the sand is turning color and is getting richer because a lot of that, is leaching down with the water through the really nice fertile layer and into that sandy layer underneath, and thus making it a little more fertile as well. Alright, so it's kind of up to you on how you use it when you're prepping your beds. You can either put it on top or you can incorporate it in. That's something that you can decide as to whether you want to do one or the other or both. Like this time around, because I have incorporated quite a bit into the soil, I'm probably just going to layer it on top of this particular bed, and then I'll plant stuff into it, and then it will work its way in as you pull weeds or as you dig up root vegetables and such. It's going to naturally get turned and get cycled down into the lower levels of the soil. Alright, so that's basically how you go about using compost. It's really very simple. Put it on top of the dirt, let it rot down into the dirt. It feeds the worms, it feeds the bugs, it feeds the microorganisms within the soil. It feeds basically the entire garden. And I know that a lot of people think that you need to feed your plants, but really what you need to feed is your soil. If you feed your soil with compost, as time goes on, more and more biological activity will start taking place in your soil, and that is what actually feeds your plants. Alright, and that's the beauty of compost. So I highly recommend compost. It is the most sustainable way to go about fertilizing your garden and making your garden a better and richer, more wholesome soil to produce your vegetables in. Alright, so that's what I got going on today. That's how I use my compost. Please check out these other two videos. I'll put them in the end screen. that show you, one, how to make the compost, two, how to maintain basically the compost, and then of course this one is all about how to use it. Hopefully that answers all your questions. If you don't have the answer to the question you might have about compost, please do me a favor, give me a comment. Let me know and I'll do my best to answer the questions you might have. So thanks once again for stopping by. Do me a favor, give me a like and a subscribe and let me know what you think. But most importantly, grow something. And if you really want to grow something, the best way to start is by growing your soil. Alright, thanks once again. Y'all take care. Come back and see me.